Okay, so this is Sunday. Greetings, brothers and sisters. This is going to be a standalone video again with the preparing for death sittings playlist on Gratefulness meditation, and then 100th, 90th edition of the Journey series. So this is, I'm, working with this thoughtlessness state, and it's almost like it's like a switch is being thrown, where I just have this thought, it's not even a thought, like just to switch over to a where I'm by turning my mind off, and I'm still having thoughts come in occasionally. It's not like it's completely thought free. So you have to work on it, like you have to work on not thinking, So you have to. There's some effort to not put it. It's like it's effort to have no effort. Like it's a kind of a weird thing. But I gave my wife a sitting yesterday, and it worked really well. Like it's just enhancing my preceptor work, and then doing the satsang last night. In the morning, so like after midnight. I went to bed right around midnight, and I do the satsang for Sunday for people to meditate whenever they wake up. Whatever they can do it on Sunday morning, and my morning meditation was good as well. And so it's doing the satsang in the morning, like I do it as a meditator. And I really, have felt that this is great. And then going to sleep with I say the prayer, and then I, throw the switch, and then, but I've been restless. There's also sometimes it creates restlessness, like a lot of restlessness. There's times at night where it's like I go through cleaning and or detox. And, if I don't eat before bed, I have trouble sleeping, and my liver will detox, which is a good thing. And then I've been eating a lot of dandelions and things like that, which also, there's bitter greens in the spring that stimulate detoxification. And, and I want to do at some point, like springtime detox, like after the winter, you're supposed to do that. But, I just haven't. I mean, it's stuff that it's on the list to do. And I feel like when you do the thoughtfulness, or when I'm doing the thoughtlessness, exercise, that at night there could be a tendency for like a spiritual detox of stuff that's there that just gets released because you're not thinking about anything else. Like the same way I'm talking about the physical body. And I've been having restless nights anyway. This is why I started doing it in the first place. And, once I go to sleep, it's a very, going to a deep, really deep sleep. And last night I woke up and I went to go back to sleep, and I was already pretty tired. And I threw the switch to do the thoughtlessness state. And I immediately had a panic attack. So I don't want to call it a panic attack. I just experienced panic. Like, this was like some part of me was like associating the thoughtlessness state with death, right? Like it just, and I should say that occasionally, and I think it's mostly since post-COVID, I wake up panicked, like wake up like I'm like, when I was having COVID, I felt like I was going to die. I couldn't breathe. And so I'd wake up panicked, and that was something that I don't remember ever happening before. And at one time I had that spasm that I thought was a heart attack, like something like that. But I was awake for a little bit before that kicked in, like it was a weird night. Years and years ago, that happened to me a couple of times. So I have these back spasms, and I think they're intercostal ribs things. I don't know. That it almost feels like I have the whole thing just, it is whatever it is. But the COVID thing, like I started to have these times where I just wake up like if like I'm fighting for my life. And I've had some issues, lately where I get into such a deep sleep state that my sometimes I woke up last night and both my arms were pins and needles. And so my wife had discovered that if you wiggle your head and get your head like a little bit upright, it helps to get the blood back to your arms. But I've been sleeping so deeply during this period of time. I made a video 2 weeks ago about how my wife and I were just so restless. It was maybe last Friday, so maybe it's a week ago. but like I've been sleeping really deeply when I go to sleep. So I'm restless, but I'm going to sleep, and then deeply, whatever. And so sometimes I wake up and I'm not breathing right, and I'm sort of gasping for air a little bit, or I'm just sleeping oddly. And again, nothing to worry about. I'm not going to put this on my normal channel because I don't want all these people freaking out. Like I mean, dying in my sleep. Like most people die in their sleep. Most people die in some sort of unconscious state. Like when I mean, a lot of times people go into like a comatose state, or whatever it is, and it takes them a while, whatever. And so that's not a horrible way to go. Obviously, being able to be thoughtless in that condition is much more possible. But either way, like it's not something I worry about. But like occasionally I wake up and there's some sense of fear there. And then, this specific fear was about like the fear of not having my thoughts. Like I had some, not being able to think, not be able to be conscious as this, what I am as a, when you're a person, like you're incarnated as a physical person, you have an identity and an ego and body consciousness. And, when you die, you take some of that with you, obviously, and the least you take with you, the better for your spiritual self and your identity and these things. And, that idea that when you die, like that just goes away, like that part, like people, like to think that they have an afterlife and that makes them feel better about death. And it is, this is just a temporary thing, an illusion, third dimensional reality. But what it's like to be you as a person, that ends, like some part of that ends. The specificity of your individual identity as a human being and the things that go into you as a personality and the thoughts you have. And so some sense of, that idea of being thoughtless is like, like it's a way, it's like dying a little bit, right? Not, and I woke up with that, thought, like when I went to do the thoughtlessness condition so I could go back to sleep. And I was already going to go back to sleep anyway. So it was interesting. Like I felt like it was, when you get older, you are aware of death, right? So I'm in a state where, I'm 60. Most people, my brother's still doing well at 70s, and my sisters, they're all in their 70s. 3 sisters. My brother's 18 years older than me, so he's almost 80. My parents lived into their 90s. My one grandmother lived till she was 99. 3 grandparents lived into their 90s. My one who died early died in his 80s, and he was in 2 world wars. And he was a fireman. He smoked cigarettes. He died of lung cancer, and he worked with a bunch of toxic shit. Like he made fishing poles with epoxy glue, and he worked in. I mean, probably the worst thing was being a fireman when they didn't wear masks. And again, 2 world wars. The First World War, which they used all that toxic shit, and he died of lung cancer much earlier than he probably would have. He might have outlived everybody, but his wife lived to 99, almost 100 years old. And there's just longevity in my family. But, there's, when you're past 40 or 50, people start dying, like just dying, like not just some tragic thing. People start dying of heart attacks or cancer, or, people do that in their 40s and 30s. But it's like you get into your 50s and you see like if you are in touch with your, high school people, or have, your friends when you were in college, or these people, you see that people start dying. Like you'll have people, your peers, your siblings, people start to die. And, it's 60s, 70s, this is like, you're getting into where it's like, all right, are you going to outlive the people die at 78 on average. And so, death is like just there for you. You're physically not the same as you were. You realize your body's getting old. You start having physical issues. And so death is just a part of it. Like you just, you're more conscious of death. When you're a kid, you become aware of it. Like I talk about Anne Marie Lopez, who was a girl who was in my kindergarten, first grade class, and she died when I was in 2nd grade, I believe. And a teacher came in, she said she died of leukemia. And I remember her missing a lot of school. Like I don't remember shit from my, from those times in my, but I remember that. Like, so, I was like, kids could die? Like, you didn't even think about it. You don't think about it as a kid, it's like, you get scared sometimes, but they're just, like death isn't really a thing. And then as, you feel indestructible as you become a young adult and like, but then, reality sets in when you're in your 30s and 40s and you start getting older and you see the differences. And then at some point you're past your halfway point. I'm certainly past my halfway point. I'm not going to live to 120, right? And so, you turn 40s and 50s. That's where you're in your midlife, midlife crisis. There's some, you're halfway through, and the back half is always going to go faster than the front half. It just does. Weirdly enough, time is different as you get older. The years just melt, the years just fly by. And, so there's all these things. And I'm much more aware of this as a possibility, right? And so you start thinking about, which is a good thing because it's going to happen and it's natural and there's something there. But there's also natural fear of death, and there's these things. And so, I had this like panic about it, like just not just the, I didn't wake up gasping for breath or anything. I was fine when I woke up. But then when I threw the switch, it caused me to have some emotional fear reaction. And so in the old days, I would write to Master Chargy about this, right? Like, because I prayed that this fear would be clean, like knowing it's there, a buried fear that, it's a good thing that it came out because, I'm preparing to die and I want to be able to, be able to do this thoughtlessness thing. And I don't want to have a panic attack and then die, like that. It's not a good way to die, like there's cleaning that can happen ahead of time that can make that transition easier, right? Which is, definitely the goal, like for what I'm doing here, And so, this is a playlist about preparing to die. But in the old days, you could write to Master Chargy. Like one of the guys I was friends with who was my age, he was a contemporary, someone who has similar background. And, we were both, kind of assholes, whatever, like, a little bit different than the average person doing Sahaj Marg. There weren't many people my age. And we used to have conversations about this. And he had he just started having these panic attacks. But he worked at, he was a scientist and he worked, I don't know, he drank a lot of coffee, which he gave up. And he said the panic attacks kind of went away, but then they came back and then, I don't know. I don't know if he went back to coffee. I don't know what ended up happening. But he wrote to Chargy about it. Chargy said it's a fear of drowning. You're drowned in a past life. And, this is what came to him. And these panic attacks were about that, right? Like traumatic death of drowning where you die in a total state of panic and fear. And then you die. It's a bad way to die. Where you're panicked. And then, and that was, he took that with him into his next life and whatever it was, and how many lives he had between now and then, who knows. But it happened, and it was coming up through the cleaning process. The guy was in his 30s when it was happening, so it was helping him not have some scar as he going into his elder years or whatever it is, right? But anyways, it was something that was affecting his spiritual condition, and it was something you write to Chargy about. And he would pray about it. He might send you an answer, he might not, but it would fix it. And as, time went on, I learned to write to him less and less and just allow the thing to play out and, put it before God. What you would write to the master about was putting something before God, and you would eventually learn to do it for yourself for the most part. But this is something I might write to him, like even now, if I, had that ability. It'd be a brief couple of lines about how I was doing this thing of having this thoughtless state, and then, it would be about that. Like, people are supposed to send him their diaries every once in a while, or excerpts from them, so he would see what, like, they weren't supposed to, but they could. But then there was too many people for that, so that stopped being a thing. But he would, get a sense of where they were spiritually, right? Because there's people all over the world, and you didn't get to spend time with them and get to know them. But they were, things that were specific about their spiritual meditations or condition. And, if there was something that came up, like that was, noteworthy, might write to them and have this fear, be cleaned out, like whatever fear of death was brought up by this thing. But I just, prayed about it last night, and whatever. And and we'll work on cleaning as well. But it's, I'll have these sittings too that I'm going to be doing on this playlist. This is, for the people watching this on the Gratefullness Meditation channel. There'll be this playlist will have some sittings at some point. Deeper sittings and sittings that are just basically there to help people prepare for death. This thing. I think there's already a couple sittings. That's what the playlist is about. So, I haven't done anything on this playlist in a while. And there might be a sitting, like a Tuesday sitting, that just feels like it should be on this playlist, right? But this is something for people to, over time. It's not something to be obsessed about, like from time to time, thinking about it and, having some cleaning about it and preparing for it, right? Like Babaji, there's the end of what they call the Mahapralaya, which is the end of the universe. The universe is now expanding, and at some point it will implode. It will go the other way. And Babaji discovered this. There's going to be a saint, higher developed soul, that's going to be the catalyst, is going to make the universe implode, right? If there was a superhero movie, they would try to stop that guy. Like, you know what I mean? But this is something that's supposed to happen. And the universe implodes, and then everything disappears, and then starts over again, right? Which is hard to think about, because that's, where your soul is no longer, like your soul is eternal, but only from, that's not, the universe isn't eternal like people think it is. So there's a time where the universe goes from contracting, from expanding to contracting. And there's a soul that is going to be doing that work. And Babaji was instructed to transmit to that soul, in the future, and help that soul, whatever. So that was kind of interesting. So in that same way, there is preparation for your death and how you die, because it's really important, like for your, liberation and your possible whatever you're going to go, your next life here or somewhere else. I mean, the moment of death is really important. So whatever reaction I had, there was a fear-based reaction to the thoughtlessness state. There's some fear there that would be good to get rid of, right? That would be good to, have some cleaning done, so I'll be focusing on that. Like I said, there would be some, this is where having a living master would be more important, but, it still can be dealt with just out of consciousness. Like, I got to do it, myself now because of the situation. And so, anything like this comes up, you pray about it, that it would be cleaned off. And, there was this exchange between Charji and Babaji. And Charji did some meditation where he developed like a phobia of being alone. He did some other type of meditation, and it created like a fear of being alone. So like if something got messed up, sometimes when you do other spiritual meditative practices, there can be negative effects. Sometimes a guru who doesn't know what they're doing, and the person will get their kundalini stimulated. There was a guy who, big southern guy, and he did some meditation under a guru, and he was completely messed up. Like, he gained a bunch of weight, and he was really fucked up afterwards. And Charji said, it's amazing this guy's alive. But Charji was able to rework his internal system, through the cleaning and transmission process. But, there's things that happen. And for Charji, he meditated and developed this fear. And as time went on, it was there, and he was getting cleaned out by Babaji. And Babaji said, today I've removed 30% of your fear. Today I've removed another 10% of your fear. Like, over time in the cleaning process. And Charji got pissed off one day and said, why don't you just remove it all? I don't want any of it. Why, what about this percentage? And so, not pissed off, but irritated or whatever. And Babaji said, good, let's sit. And Charji said there was like a shadow face, like a dark face, like almost like a shadow at his face, and he saw it just being removed in meditation. And then just like fear, you have to have some level of natural fear or whatever. But, these things that are like fear is some skara, like, phobias and irrational fear. And that was all removed, which is kind of interesting. So, anyways, this is interesting. I have definitely different condition at night than I do during the day. Like I'm generally in good mood all day. I don't get like negative emotions, but I do get stuff at night. Sometimes I get irritated. Sometimes anger comes out. Things like this. Oftentimes unprovoked by my physical. Like I'm not mad about something in my life. I'm not. There's nothing I'm happy with everything and whatever. But then just stuff will just come out at night and dreams and through the sleep process or restlessness before I go to sleep or these things, waking up and sometimes like I wake up and go to the bathroom and all of a sudden like there'll be anger there and like I'm not angry at anything or anybody, it'll just be there or frustration or like I said, restlessness. And so this is part of that, but it's also where the system is working, and that's why I was working to do the prayer and do the thoughtlessness situation and allow the night work to happen, right? The work that can be done when you're sleeping. So anyways, let me wrap this one up here. Only spirituality will save this world. It's Paramano, definitely reporting from the Apocalaughs and the Ascension. Everyone have a blessed day and be grateful.